No, I agree. I'm just waiting
Yeah.
on John to tell me that we're live. Okay, this is These Old Farts, another exercise in technology. Uh, Today we want to do something a little bit different, at least to start. Uh, that is, in the last week, I'm sure everybody who's watching has heard about uh, people who have blown up on seemingly trivial events and had fatal consequences in some cases. The four I'm thinking of, there may be others that I'm not aware of, was a black teenager uh, was sent by his mother to go pick up his kids, his younger siblings at a party, and he knocked on the wrong door. Actually, rang a doorbell. The homeowner got up out of bed. He was asleep. Came to the door with a 38, opened up the door and shot the kid, and then opened up the glass door that he had shot through and shot the kid again. Um, a homeowner saw a car full of kids, girls, um, pull into his driveway and then pull out of the driveway. And he went out on his porch and started shooting at the car, killing a 20-year-old. Um, a a couple of teenage cheerleaders had a full day of doing whatever it is that they do, and went to the parking lot and got into a car that they, at least one of them got into the car thinking it was their car. There was a guy in the passenger seat. The teenager said, "Oops, sorry," or something similar to that. Got out, went and got into their own car. The guy in the passenger seat got out of the car and started shooting at the cheerleaders. And finally, in North Carolina, um, a guy who had just moved into the neighborhood was kind of pissed at all the kids in the neighborhood, and they were making noise and fooling around and all this stuff. And a bunch of kids were playing on the lawn, and they're playing with a basketball. The basketball rolled into the guy's yard. He started yelling and screaming. One of the parents came over and said, if you got a problem, talk to me. Don't yell at my kid. The guy pulled out a gun and started shooting at the first group of people. Then he ran down the street and started shooting at other people, and eventually was able to shoot a father who had gotten in the path of a bullet intended or aimed at his little kid. And the homeowner is now in the hospital with a shot in the back. I, I'm not talking about the fact that they were using guns. I don't think guns are all that important. It could have been a baseball bat. It could be anthrax. It could be all kinds of things. My question is, why are these people so angry? Why do they feel that they have to respond in a violent manner? So that's my opening statement. Chuck, you're number one on my screen.
Well, I think there are not, we don't know the reasons for these individual situations. That my inclination, first off, is to lean towards mental health issues with these people. Unfortunately, I think that many of these people, uh, some people must be aware of these issues that some of these people have, and they just have ignored the issue. Don't want to believe it. Their relative or friend has such serious issues and has just ignored it or tried to ignore it. And I think there's rage that builds up in people because of all kinds of pressure that's out there right now. The aspect of the issue with inflation going on in the country, um, other pressures that people have, not having enough money coming in, adds to things, and we just don't know what these reasons may be. So I think we need to wait to find out what kind of answers we get. I think it's unfortunate. Going back to, I'm not sure you said something, Bob, about the shooting at that school where the girl that was a former student, but the manifesto that she supposedly wrote, as far as I know, still has not been disclosed. That seems very odd to me. What do you have to say, Paul?
Um, I have an observation. It's an opinion of those different things. I agree with you wholeheartedly that these people have mental issues, and um, you know, before they get a license to carry a gun, they need to get a pass from at least 3 psychiatrists. You know, that's one thing. The guy, the car that went up the driveway, I was looking at the at the um, at the TV as they were describing the house, and it was a dirt driveway. It was like a dirt road leading up to the house, and I can see the guy thinking the people getting out of the car were coming to rob him, and um, he was afraid for his life, and I can see that. And but instead of asking them why were they there, and they had the opportunity to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I thought this was, I was just trying to turn around." Um, he started shooting. As far as the guy that the 84-year-old that shot the black kid looking for his two siblings to take them home, he got the wrong street, the right number but the wrong street. Knocked on the door, and the guy came with a gun to the door to answer. Uh, he must have been really afraid for something, for some reason. Then he saw a black kid on the doorstep, and his instinct was to shoot the black kid. You know why? You know what? Why did he have that? If the kid had been white, would he have shot him? I don't. I think not. But maybe the other thing is after he shot him, the kid went out and fell on the grass outside, and he went outside. He left his house down the stairs and shot him again. Um, absolutely, that's just crazy. Um, so it's crazy people with violent weapons and using them, and that's just it's just not acceptable in this time. You know, we're in the 21st century here. We're supposed to be educated, and it looks like we're getting less and less educated. And one of my favorite statistics is half the people in the country have below average intelligence. That's a fact, you know, because the average is the middle, you know, half above and half below. And things are just happening that just don't make any sense at all. I'm sorry, I've been talking too long. Omanan, you're up.
Thank you. What I was going to just make a couple of points, and I agree with both of you actually. But what I also was going to point out that over the years, I think given the way we have cultural shift has happened, there is sociological shift has happened in the country, and that also has led to a lot of pressures, which also manifests into different behavior. And well, the problem then is that although there is a cultural shift in our thinking and in our behavior, that behavior should not end up killing people. But that is where the psychiatric issues come up. Are these people really psychologically tackling some issues which are different from the normal population? Other people in the United States, I don't know, and we don't know that either. What are the circumstances? How they felt threatened in different situations? But at the same time, when you by mistake get into somebody's car and you apologize, and then the guy comes out and chases you down and begins to shoot, that means that goes to an extreme. It is no longer that they were actually afraid. They are now out to get them. So that's where I again go back to that cultural shift over the decades, that long time ago, I never heard of these things happening 40, 50 years ago. And now we hear this more and more often, and lately more so than other times. So that's what I kind of wonder about, both cultural shift and at the same time, are people more likely thinking that violence is the appropriate tool to use, whether it is a gun or it's a baseball bat or a missile or whatever. So without thinking what the consequences are. So although we are educated, as you said, but we see the similar thing happening in politicians. They blame each other, yell at each other, talk to them about being liars or whatever, and then they don't want to own up those words. So it's kind of throughout the society. That's what I see. With that, I'm going to stop talking.
Well, some of what you guys were saying was people are afraid, and I understand. Certainly in the first case, the black teenage kid, the guy was afraid. He saw a 6-foot, very strong person in front of him who happened to be black. When the kid, if you see pictures of him, number one, he wasn't 6 feet. Number two, if he was 170 pounds, which I'm about 5'8" at this point, maybe 5'7", and I'm about 160 pounds. So if I don't seem threatening, why would he? That may be just a perception. He's black, therefore he's dangerous. But when someone goes out of their way to chase down somebody who's leaving, even if they had bad intentions, and obviously there's no way to know whether they had bad intentions or not, but to chase them down means that it's something more than I'm afraid.
Mhm.
And the big question, I think, is what do I and my kid and my son-in-law and my neighbors do to protect themselves? Or more importantly, what does our society do to protect itself against this kind of thing? Later on, when I have another couple of minutes, I'll recount a Twilight Zone show that I think may be relevant. I don't know. Does somebody have any additional thoughts?
Well, the additional thought is that do you think that not only can you think about how you can have some additional education about people's behavior? Do you want to teach them how to behave? And that is supposed to be the school's job. But at the same time, when you see this happen everywhere, that means something is not permeating throughout the society, so that those pieces in the civics part are being missed, so that the only recourse is violence.
You're right about the schools, because the schools are, in some areas of the country, they are prohibiting teaching about the full gamut of society. They, the quote woke thing is prohibited. They're they're prohibiting books from being in the library. They're prohibiting all kinds of different things, and it's just uh, it's I think it's to dumb down the rest, the people who are trying to learn. You know, I don't know. I think we're all educated, and we think a great deal about education, and it just bothers me an awful lot that um, education is being restricted. You know, I don't know. Anybody else got any ideas on that?
You
Well,
know,
I think I'm not sure that the COVID-19 isn't playing some part of all this the recent stuff that's happening also. That so many people have either been isolated or self-isolated, and they built up all this anxiety, and they're just overreacting. So I think that's an unfortunate part of that also. Um, and I'm a little disappointed that I watch a lot of news shows during the week, and as I think back on it just momentarily ago, I haven't seen. I'm not sure I can say I've seen any so-called psychiatrists on any of the programs speaking on what they think of all this shooting and whether or not there's a psychiatric is increased problem. So I'm a little surprised that I haven't seen any more explanations on their parts. What do you think, Bob?
I will say that I haven't necessarily seen any of that of a psychiatrist trying to explain it, but I'll be perfectly honest, I haven't watched much news recently. This has been a kind of a crazy week for me, and I really haven't had a chance to sit down and get into my normal groove. I do have something, if nobody else has something, I have a conspiracy theory, which it'll take more than 3 minutes. So I think we should pass it on to somebody else and then come back to me.
I was gonna add to what Paul talked about how our education and dumbing down. But what I found out, for example, at Yale, there was a conservative judge who had been invited to talk, and he was shouted down by the associate dean. And that I thought that was appalling, that given that they had invited the judge, no matter what his views were, he's a conservative judge, but then once you invite him, you treat him as a guest and let him speak. And instead, even the associate dean joined in with the protesters. So I thought that was kind of appalling. And no matter how much law the students are going to learn, are these the future lawyers who will suppress the opinions of others? That's what worried me there. So that's what I'm thinking about education, not only in the schools, but at large in the larger institutions as well.
Yeah, I think that when you talk about education, we forget that we're educated by something more than what we learned in high school or grade school or college or whatever. Our environment educates us. Mm-hmm. Certainly what we see on TV or on the computer educates us. And I'm wondering in part if that's the problem. While I have a moment, many, many years ago, there was a show called The Twilight Zone, which was extremely well written, etc. And there was one episode that I think is relevant here. Suddenly, in a neighborhood, suddenly the lights go out. And there's no explanation. Everybody's fiddling around trying to make things get fixed, and nothing's working. So the neighbors come outside and they're trying to cooperate.
Bob, start again because you were stopped in the middle just after you said Twilight Zone.
Okay. A number of years ago, there was an episode of the Twilight Zone, and it starts with a neighborhood outside of a city, and everybody's living their life, and then suddenly the lights go off, all the electricity goes off, and everybody's running around trying to figure out what's going on. And the neighbors are coming outside, exchanging thoughts, etc., and everybody's cooperating. Suddenly, the lights on one house go on, and the neighborhood begins to, oh, it's you. You've done this to us. And suddenly there's a lot of fighting, etc. And then at the very end, you see these two creatures sitting around what looks like a laptop saying, we don't have to invade and fight these people. They will destroy themselves. All you have to do is take away some of the normal things they're used to. And I am wondering, my conspiracy theory is, are the Russians who have been trying to create chaos in the country, is this their most successful form of chaos, where everybody is afraid of everybody else because they see in their echo chamber, and I've invented a word, it's called otherhood. Everybody else is the other. Everybody else is a threat. Any comments?
Let me say something, then I can hand it over to somebody else. It's a. I mean, Rod Serling was something else in that Twilight Zone. I appreciated that very well. But what I was going to say is that the conspiracy theory looks kind of nice, but at the same time, you also have to see that media we have is playing as a large player in this society at this time. And what we have, knowingly or unknowingly, the media players actually cash on the ability to create this other situation. And we have Robert Murdoch has been one of the persons who somehow cashed on this thing, that he could really create. He saw the niche which was available and found out how to make money out of this. And similarly, the so-called liberal media, they are pandering to another crowd. So we have this whole gamut of media moguls who are actually cashing on the emotional aspect of people and feeding us all whatever they like, and accordingly we get into these echo chambers and feel happy, but then when we get out of the echo chambers, we can't tolerate that other. So that is what I find one of the aspects of, maybe that is part of the conspiracy theory, conspiracy being played by somebody in Russia.
I was thinking of another show that I don't know whether it was Twilight Zone or Star Trek or whatever, but they visited a planet. It's probably Star Trek, where people were half black and half white, meaning some people were white on their left side and black on their right side, and the other people were vice versa, black on their right side and white on their left side. And they hated each other because they were their white side was on the wrong side, or their black side was on the wrong side, and had nothing to do with their individuality or their brains or anything like that. They looked different, and that was some kind of a play on what's going on here. The blacks are different than whites, and it's and the fact of the matter is they're not different. They're the only thing that matters is how your brain works.
Well, another one of the same thing is Dr. Seuss's The Sneetches. For those of you who don't have little kids or haven't had them recently, Dr. Seuss wrote a book where there was two classes of people, those with belly buttons and those without. And the ones with belly buttons thought they were better. And then somebody invented a machine that could give everybody a belly button. So all the people without belly buttons went through the machine. And now the people who were originally with belly buttons said, well, wait a minute. So the guy invented another machine to take them away. And the illustrations have lines of sneetches going through one machine, coming around and going through the second machine. And it's obviously it's sarcasm, but it makes the point that Paul was making, that probably 99.9% of all the DNA of human beings is the same. And oh, by the way, 99% of all the DNA of human beings is the same as chimpanzees.
Yep.
So there's got to be something else.
Well, I'm not so unsure that all this vandalism and rioting that's gone on and for so long in some of the major cities throughout the country is not attributing to some of this issues also, that people are all wound up and they're feeling threatened, and so they're over. If they don't have a mental issue, they're overreacting, or if they do have a mental issue, that it doesn't take much to have them react. So I think there's so many pieces of this that we need to get some answers on what we need to do.
Well, I think, without question, I think that for some individuals, the race issue is a big piece of it. But in 3 of the 4 situations that I talked about at the beginning of the show, it was white on white.
Mhm.
So if your problem is with the black or the other color, what about these 3 situations? Somebody said earlier, and thinking about it, I think that the idea of COVID, I think it was Chuck who was talking about COVID.
Yeah.
I think that may have more to do with it than I really thought before, because we were so isolated, and there was anger about the isolation. Instead of saying, I got to protect me or my family or my neighbor or whoever, they were isolated and didn't want to be isolated. And we saw what happened in China when China tried to even be more strict. And maybe there's something that can be done about, if COVID is the primary source. I'm assuming there are many sources. Maybe forcing people to get out of their house and interact might alleviate some of this tension. Is that something to think about?
Well,
Paul?
something to think about, yes. But the other aspect of being isolated is a lot of people got a lot of information from online, where they might go to some website that's that's full of stuff that's not true, and they think it's true. And I've talked to people about that, and even in my own family, they have some wild ideas, and
Is the problem that
I
it's
kind of
not true, or the problem that the viewer wants it to be true?
probably viewer wants it to be true, but the ones in my family are convinced in strange ideas that they have online, and they take these websites as being absolute proof. Doctors said this, or scientists said this, or, et cetera, et cetera. And they're just wrong. And it's driving me out of my mind.
Well,
Okay, I'm not coming to your house and ringing the bell.
No,
I-
no. It's when I go to their house.
Oh, all
But
right.
go on. Somebody else.
I was gonna agree with you, both of you actually, all of you actually, in fact, saying that yes, COVID has been a stressor on all of us. But at the same time, once the stressor is there, the behavior of each person to cope with it has to be different. But some of the people may go down the psychiatric issue lane, and some of the us might not be going that way. So that's, again, it's very difficult to say at this time. I'm sure there might be people might be studying that, but the question is, are these people who did this random shooting or targeted shooting essentially, did they fall in the psychiatric case category? We don't know. But we do know that they all did face the COVID isolation and COVID related stress. And it has been, and people have studied that, yes, COVID created a lot of stress on people, which is beyond doubt. But going back to Paul's about websites and stuff, which people write their own blogs and have their own opinions, but they, at the same time, we have to, I think we all have to agree that there has to be a good discussion about different opinions. We don't have to follow all of those as a God-given free will. It's a good idea to analyze and then decide, are those things true or not? But then different people make different conclusions. Again, that tells you how diverse we are.
Well, it's very difficult to know what's true or not true now, more so than ever. And with the whole expansion of AI, and it may make this even more difficult to be able to determine those answers. So, what else do you have to say, Bob, about it?
About AI,
Or
it's a
anything?
little scary. Huh? I'm sorry, did
No, I was saying, or anything. Yeah.
I I agree with you that it is very difficult to determine what is factual and what isn't. True is, I think, a little different concept, but definitely factual, because we don't experience it ourselves. And even if we experience it ourselves, we're finding that some of those things can be misleading. My daughter is in television. She can put Omanon can put a background on his computer and make it appear that he's in Washington, D.C., in the Congress, for example. And I have no way of knowing whether, in fact, that's true or not. I trust Omanon, so I accept it to be true. If I don't trust somebody, my immediate reaction would be probably, that doesn't sound right. And I don't know what you do about that. It is becoming very, very easy to get to a point where you can't trust your own eyes. And forever, certainly in the history of the United States, forever, you can't necessarily trust what you read or what somebody tells you. So I don't know. I don't have an answer.
I think we have to read both sides and then decide. And that's not going to help us because we'll decide in the favor of the opinion that we agree, are inclined to agree with. If you're liberal, you'll be inclined to agree with the liberal. If you're conservative, you're inclined to agree with the conservative, and so you end up basically um, on the same side. You always were independent of the facts, I guess.
then what you find is you find yourself in what amounts to a cult. I think about Jim Jones
Mhm.
in San Francisco. Originally, as I understand the story, he founded an organization that tried to help people who were dealing with abuse, opioid, alcohol. I don't remember the details.
Alcohol, I thought.
Alcohol, and it was amazingly successful. And part of the success was he built a group people could feel part of, and they were willing to pay the price of giving up whatever their addiction was to be part of the group. And after a while, the thing morphed, and Jim Jones saw himself as essentially a god. And although the original, as I understand it, the original goal was laudable and the original execution was successful, ultimately, things were possibly worse than they would have been if the people had just been left to their own devices.
Mentioning that, Bob, it made me remember. I just heard earlier today or yesterday that this is, I think yesterday or yesterday was I think the 30th anniversary of Waco.
I
And
thought that was a couple of weeks ago. I thought the anniversary is when
okay,
Trump did his rally in
Yeah.
Waco.
I can't remember when. I know there's some
yeah.
programs on Waco that have just come out,
Mhm.
and there were a lot of mistakes made, particularly on the government side in this country, on the way they handled that. And so whatever information they had and facts they had, they didn't use the proper judgment. If you listen to the story that I've heard.
Okay, again, I'm not an expert on it, but I do know that there was a stalemate for like a month. So it wasn't like somebody went rushing in. There were fears, whether they were founded or not, I don't think we'll ever know, that there was abuse going on, and somebody ultimately decided they had to do something.
Well, again, before any of us make judgments on any issue, we should make sure we check the facts. And
Agreed.
my first impressions when I heard about it many years ago, especially after it first happened, was to be inclined to be critical of that of the Koresh family, whatever it was called. But after hearing some more of the facts by some of the people involved that were on the government side, then I'm more inclined to think that there was some issues. And so I think it'd be worthwhile, if you don't know a lot about it, and I don't know all of it, to look into it, because I think it's very interesting.
On the other hand, there was something that happened afterwards, and I don't remember the details, but there was a rancher, and I think he was in Nevada, who was having his cows graze on federal land, which was acceptable as long as you paid a fee. He refused to pay the fee. The government said, you got to pay the fee. He said, no. So at one point, they sent some sheriffs to clear things up, and the guy responded with guns. And then suddenly, all of the militias in the area came to the town that was close to where this guy's ranch was, took over the town, and basically were providing armed protection for the rancher. Now, I think ultimately he was arrested, and there was no major confrontation. But I think that's in part what they were trying to do in Waco unsuccessfully.
Well, I'm not going to comment anymore at this point. I think you need to look into some of these things further.
And I agree. I I am
It's
very,
easy for
very,
it's
uh,
e- we all get exposed to very small snippets of information, and unless you really take the time to really look into it, um, you can very easily come away with the wrong impressions. Or so I think we need to take a relook at some of the things in the past. Um Anyways,
yeah,
I think we need to look at the things that are in the present.
Mm.
You know, we have uh, you know, fights between the, verbal fights between the television programs, and it's, news programs, or at least they're called news. Both of them, claim to be news, or all of them claim to be news. But you know, it was I was shocked to hear all of the things that were going on at Fox, where their um, their uh, newscasters are measures of ceremonies. Like, I think one of the guys was praising Trump on the air and said he hates his effing guts, in an email. And it's just that's one of the reasons they settled for 787.5 million, and we're going to see what happens with the next one. But um, it's disturbing when people on news programs, where they claim to be news programs, distort the facts, and they know they're distorting the facts, and they're told to distort the facts, whether the left-leaning ones or the right-leaning ones are doing it. They're both are probably doing it to some extent. So I guess you know I don't know how you correct this, whether the government corrects it. And I guess, Omanon shaking his head. The government can't correct it because they're political.
yeah.
And I don't know.
I think we all grew
What do you
up.
think, Omanon?
What,
Okay.
what I was gonna say that number one, we should not ask the government to curb people's opinion, because it will become a bad precedent. Number one, because that means freedom of expression will become a problem. But at the same time, the news outlets who are providing opinions, they are in the business of getting money. When you look at any news program, whether it is real news, they don't put all the news on the show, because they have to edit to make sure the items that glue us to the TV, only those pieces show up. Other pieces are thrown away. But that is because they have to get money, and in order to get money, they have to have us glued to the screen. And so you can see how the decisions in the TV industry, whether they are liberal, so-called liberal, or conservative, or extreme, they all make those decisions to essentially cater to the one need, that is getting money. But at the same time, the idea that government can curb all that will be counterproductive from my standpoint, and it will have implications beyond the industry.
Let me throw out something kind of a follow on to what Omanon said. We all grew up watching Walter Cronkite. It was called the most trusted man in America. If he said it, then people accepted. Okay, that's what it is. I may like it, I may not like it, doesn't matter. Then in the 1980s, they threw out something called the Fairness Doctrine, which said you have to show on TV or on the radio both sides. Whenever you're reporting something, you have to show both interpretations of what it is you're doing. And the net result was Fox News, MSNBC, lesser extent CNN, OAN, Newsmax, take your pick. Maybe a reinstitution, assuming it's even possible, of the fairness doctrine might solve the problem. You can still have an opinion, and you can state your opinion. Number one, you have to say this is an opinion. This is an interpretation of what we understand actually happened. But you got to show somebody else's opinion as well. Is that a doable thing?
That I would agree with, actually. The fairness doctrine, bring it back, but I don't know what kind of system will that bring in, because given that we had a lag of we had a gap of so many years, and now the world has changed, the industry has changed, and will the industry be willing to accept that? Because there are all these lobbyists are going to throw all their weight and all the millions in it to make sure that the politicians say no.
I think that's very real. If the population wants it, though, there will be at least some politicians who will say, okay, this is my path to power.
Chuck, you look like you're about to talk. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I was thinking in the balance of liberal stations versus conservative stations, at least on TV. You've got liberal stations being from CBS to NBC to ABC. You got CNN and MSNBC. So what's that, 5? Then you got NPR, which is obviously also a liberal. So you're going 5, 6 different outlets versus Fox and Newsmax. So the odds seem to be heavily lean towards the liberal side to get their point across.
Unfortunately, from my viewpoint, most people watch Fox.
I don't. Well, Fox gets the highest ratings.
Yes.
In most news brackets, much of the time.
Yes.
But
so,
obviously they're not drawing just conservative people.
Well, I question that. Although I have to admit, when I'm in the car and I'm trying to find out what's happening in the world, not what somebody's opinion is, but what's happening in the world, the only station I can find that has a chance of giving me the information I want is Fox Headline News. So yeah, I will on occasion listen because it's a radio station, but I will on occasion listen to it. And I think that's a very real thing. But again, if you put the fairness doctrine in, you are forcing somebody, Fox, MSNBC, take your choice, to specify this is my opinion. This is my opinion. This is why it's my opinion. Oh, by the way, we're going to ask Chuck Beauregard to give his opinion and give Chuck equal time. I think that's a chance. I'm not saying it's a cure-all. It's going to solve things 100% of the time immediately, but it's at least an opportunity to hear both sides in a reasoned manner.
I don't disagree with that. I'm trying to think of how I want to respond to that, but I think it's hard to make decisions for the government to force people to be evenly communicating their message. But I'll often see news stories come up in which those stations I mentioned, CBS, NBC, CBS, ABC, devote almost 0 minutes the certain topics that maybe Fox talked about, and they're not necessarily small stories. I mean, go back on. I think Paul said something. I can't remember exactly what you were saying, Paul. How it relates, but I was thinking of all the news stations on the liberal side that attacked Donald Trump with Russiagate, and all of that stuff, and impeaching him twice, and all these stories that came out. And none of it was proven true. Or if it was, a very, very small part. And versus what the Clinton side of things did. But I heard no apologies by ABC, CNN, any of these stations saying, "Oh, by the way, we're sorry that we blew this thing up, and we made a mistake about how we spoke about Russiagate."
By the way, Russiagate, I can factually know, because A, the guy was convicted, and B, admitted that he had done it. Paul Manafort, when he was chairman of the Trump campaign, passed on Republican polling information to the Russians. So there was interaction. Whether it was meaningful or not, you can debate. But in fact, it happened.
I read something today, and I don't have it right in front of me, saying that during the election of 2016, I can't remember who the person was, but said they can track about $135,000 that was Russian money that came into the Trump organization, versus how many millions of dollars came into the Clinton organization from foreign countries. So anyways, we're running out of time, so it's beyond time to be talking about this now. We'll have to have another opportunity to talk about more about this later.
I agree with that 100%. And again, here's one of the things where we're listening to different sources, and we're inclined, for whatever reason, to believe those sources. And what's fact, not necessarily always clear. So I think this is a good example. Anybody else have any?
I was going to add to that the problem what we are facing actually as a society is we are essentially in our own echo chambers. And I was going to say that there are Christian broadcasting networks. They also talk about various issues. Some with which I agree, and some with which I do not agree. But I tend to listen to them so that I get a viewpoint. But at the same time, you also, if that's what I would think that most of the people would like to analyze, will listen to the things, but then make up their own opinions. But unfortunately, what happens is most of the population does not really sit down, does not have the time to really read all the facts, all the details, and they listen to somebody who they trust, and then then they run with that. So that's right, how we have ended up with the opinions. We have ended up with the echo chambers, because if I hear somebody talking about something and I trust the person, I would say, "Oh, that's correct." And that's as a human being, this is our human nature. So you can't. That's what the other side of the issue is.
Paul must have something else to say before we close out.
I was just listening. I'm sorry. I don't have anything to add to that. We all listen to the stations we like to and form opinions based on that. And that's certainly what I do. I do watch Fox occasionally, and they never seem to be talking about any of the issues that are actually happening in the country. Now, I don't watch very much of it, so I never really see anything. But the issues that I'm concerned with, I guess the number one issue that I'm concerned with is the Mar-a-Lago issue, where Trump took all those all those documents, secret, top secret SCI, and he kept them, and then he returned like 150, but he kept another 200. And he said he told the lawyer to say they were all returned. Now the lawyers are in trouble because they said in court that they've all been returned, and they weren't. And that's when they found 160 more at the um, at the Mar-a-Lago by the FBI. And uh, some were in boxes, some were in Trump's desk, and they were not his documents ever to take away. And he
Are you
kept them for
equally
a
concerned,
couple of
Paul,
years.
about are you equally concerned about all the documents that Biden had that was in
As
Chinatown?
soon as soon as he said he had them, as soon as quote he found out he had them, he called the appropriate authorities and they were returned. Same thing with the other guy.
Pence.
But Trump kept claiming they were his documents, and he either failed to read what the requirements were, or he tried to get away with it. If I had done 1/100th of what he did, I would be in prison right now. I would be in prison if I had kept any document, let alone a top secret SCI document. You can't even have a top secret SCI document outside of a SCIF. It has to be it's very tightly controlled, and yet he had dozens of them.
Most of these documents that Biden had, he was not authorized, period, of having them. He wasn't president. He was vice president, or he was even a senator.
And he failed to return them. But
Biden,
again,
correct,
he claims
Biden.
he didn't know he had them because it was a place that he didn't go to.
I'm
Whether
sure
that's
you
true or
believe-
not. And the
I'm
same,
sure you
and the-
believed him.
Well,
and the same thing with Trump's vice president there. He had the same thing, and as soon as he found out he had them, he returned them.
right. The
But
difference.
Trump,
Right, can I sort of?
there's a big difference. There's
Yeah.
a big difference between having the documents and saying, "Okay, I'm returning them," but knowing you have another 160 documents that you never should have had. And then he tried to say there were his documents because he was the president and he could declassify anything he wanted. Yes, he could declassify, and there's a procedure for that, and he didn't follow the procedure. On other documents, while he was president, he followed the procedure in declassifying some of the documents. So he was dead to wrong, and that's what's gonna. I'm sure that's what's gonna do him in.
Not sure how accurate some of your things you said, Paul, are. What do you have to say, Bob, while we close out?
Okay, what I was trying to say was the difference is not that they had the documents or how they got the documents in their various offices. The difference is what they did when they found out that they had the documents. In one case, they called the appropriate people and said, "Hey, we found some stuff here. It shouldn't be here. Come look at it. We don't have the security clearance to be able to look and see what it is." In the other case, for a year and a half, he refused to turn over documents. When he finally agreed to turn over some, he said, "That's it. I don't have any more." There is evidence that after that point, he actually looked at documents, looked at things he wanted to keep, put everything else in a different place, claimed he didn't have them, although obviously he knew he did because he looked at them, and has been fighting from that point. One is, I screwed up, I'm going to fix it. The other one is, I screwed up and I don't admit it. I'm going to hold on to them for whatever reason. And it's called obstruction of justice. That's, I
Then
think,
I
what
would
the
like-
issue is.
I would like to see your facts on that, Bob.
I will try to do some research and send you some material.
Okay,
It may not be for a couple of days. As I
that's
said,
fine. That's fine.
Do you
Um,
mean to tell me that Fox hasn't talked about this? You
What's
watch
that?
Fox.